Hello everyone and welcome back. This is going to be a good one. I'm going to tell you how you can save a set of engine cases, or potentially a set of heads or anything else that has a threaded hole in it. You can see I'm standing in front of the mill. There's an engine case right there, so we're going to be doing some machine shop operations today. I have had people ask me over and over again when they've heard me referencing TIMESERTs. What is a TIMESERT? What makes them different? And how do you install them? To give you a little bit of a sneak peek, that's a Heli Coil. That's a TIMESERT. Quite a bit of a difference, and I'm going to show you how to put one in. The second thing that I'm going to do is tell you about the brand new channel that I'm starting that so many of you, thousands of you, asked for everything not motorcycle related, and that channel is called Baxter's Day Off. So stick around, we got some cool stuff to do. You've heard me mention time and time again about TIMESERTs and how I would prefer to use TIMESERTs instead of using Heli Coils. And I'm going to show you why here in just a second. But what we're doing today, we have a set of engine cases here where one of the cylinder studs pulled out of the case. Think about it. If you have an engine that has repetitive cylinder base gasket, O-ring, or head gasket leaks, there has to be a reason. Either you have a problem with the finish on top of the cylinder or the head, improper torque sequences are being used, something like that, or you've got a stud that's pulling out of the case. Most often when I see that happening on an engine that should have been prepped properly using really good MLS gaskets and those things, and you see those leaks, and I will tell a customer, why don't you just grab a torque wrench and put it on the 4 head bolts you can get to. If you can't get 40 foot-pounds out of it, you probably have started to pull a stud. Now, this becomes more and more of a problem on 2008 and later model cases. And if an engine has been built previously, maybe 2 or 3 times, maybe the head gasket has been replaced once or twice, each time those processes have been done, we have pulled on this stud and released it, pulled, released, never mind heat cycles, that sort of thing. So if an engine has been broken to, I'm going to go ahead and tell everyone, not only current customers, but future customers as well, I am going to start, I'm going to say, insisting that if I am splitting your case to put in a new crank, we need to put in TIMESERTs on all the studs to keep you from having to do it again. Now, I will admit this is a relatively rare problem on builds that I've done. It doesn't happen very often, but when it does happen, it's an expense, tearing the entire engine down to repair it properly. Now, let's take a look at the difference. Most of you are going to be familiar with, there we go, Heli Coils. It's coiled pieces of tool steel, and you would drill the hole, thread this in, and then it kind of fills the gap, and then you thread this in there, right? And it kind of secures, oh, that's the air compressor. Give it just a second. I'm just going to talk loud. Y'all have to deal with it. They kind of work, but there's something better. TIMESERTs. It's a solid piece of steel. Obviously oversized because your existing hole is drilled out. Now, cylinder studs on a twin cam, 3/8 by 16. We're going to drill this, tap it, install this solid piece of steel, and then you can even see here that the fit of that sleeve is far better than what you would see on a Heli Coil. Not only that, it's how it is secured. With a Heli Coil, you are essentially relying on thread sealant to hold this in place, Loctite, whatever. Which means most of the time, if you use a Loctite to hold your bolt in, these have a tendency to back out. Not very good. These are held in place through expansion and a tight friction fit with an anvil that threads into it and spreads it open. You'll get to see that here in a second. So, what I want to do on every set of cases that I do, it's $500 to do it, okay? You're going to find out in a second here why it costs that and the time that it takes to do it proper. The thing about compressor shut off. The thing about TIMESERTs, more precision is required to install them than a HELICOIL. The hole has to be bigger, right? Now, if we also consider that we're doing a cylinder stud, that sucker's 6 inches long. If we're off a couple of degrees down here, we're off a lot at the top. If you're off a lot at the top, it can affect how the head seals against the cylinder. It can also affect the shape of the cylinder and how it changes shape when you torque that head down, which can actually change your piston and ring fitment inside the cylinder. These cylinders flex and move. So if it were a cylinder stud, and you're trying to repair this inside the bike with the case still in the bike, I'm not going to lie, guys, it's virtually impossible to get it dead on straight. So if you try to do that, yes, you are making a potential compromise. And once you drill it crooked and put this in crooked, oh boy, is it a bear to drill this out and correct it. If you're doing smaller things, for example, rocker box studs, say on a shovel head, or rocker base bolt holes on, say, a twin cam or an Evo, that's a little easier for a do-it-yourself guy with a drill or somebody with a drill press, because both mating surfaces are flat. As long as your surfaces are flat, the top of the head, the bottom of the head should be flat, and you just have to square it up. Well, when you're dealing with cylinder studs, remember, we're on a 45 here, like that, that's pretty tough to do. And trying to do it by hand, you'll understand why I don't recommend doing that. So this is something I'm going to do on all engines we're splitting the cases on going forward, as well as something you should keep an eye out on if you're having consistent issues with base gaskets, base O-rings, or potentially head gasket problems. So that's the difference. Let's show you how to put it in. Now, the new channel, and if you guys would, here's the whole deal. What I'm going to do in the description below, I'm going to put in the new channel. It's called Baxter's Day Off, right? Baxter's Day Off. And what I'm going to do on that channel, everything that is not specifically motorcycle tech related, I'm going to put it on that channel. You guys have been so wonderful. I read through all of your comments and all that stuff. And it was amazing. The, Tales of a Parts Store Counterman, the stories of my life, the things, all that stuff that you guys have enjoyed hearing is wonderful. The stuff about the cars, everything from the Chevelle to the GTX, the GMC, the Model T, painting the panel for the All Kids Bike program, building a cabin out in the woods, doing all of these sorts of things, even down to building this place, putting in my 3-phase generator for the shop, wiring the building, tilting up walls, all the other things that I love to build. That's going to go in Baxter's Day Off. So if you would, take a look in the description and subscribe to the new channel called Baxter's Day Off. I appreciate it. The other thing I'm going to do is go back through my entire library, and every video that I have that is not motorcycle related, and these go back many, many years. It could be anything from buffing and restoring paint to all kind of stuff. I'm going to shift those videos over to the new channel. Give you guys a chance to see some of those things. Oh, I did a paint restoration on a 65 Corvette, a 36 Ford 4-door, all kind of different things. So that's where that's going. So if you guys don't mind, of course, after you subscribe to this video, give it a thumbs up and a like. Head over to Baxter's Day Off, hit a subscribe on that one, hit the reminder bell, and you'll get to see everything that I do on my day off that I now take that's not motorcycle related. So I'm just going to point the camera down here. All right, now I'm showing you this, and I understand a lot of you are not going to have any kind of fixture or anything like that to be able to do this in a drill press at the proper angle, and I understand that. This is more of explaining to you why this should be done in a precision type of environment, especially when we're dealing with cylinder studs that are that long, and the critical nature of the sealing surfaces between the cylinder and the case and the cylinder and the head. All right, cylinder stud, TIMESERT. Now, the part that you didn't see that I'm saving you, because you've seen me do this over and over again, this is very similar in exactly, if you look back on all the other videos, when I talk about fixturing up, and I also talk about tramming the head here, the table, and all of this, the case to the spindle here, all of that, making sure that I am within a 1/2 thousandths in both axes, okay? I've already done that, and you've missed that part. Now, one thing I've also done are these 3 holes, because I wanted you to see what they look like when they're complete. We're going to go through the process of just installing this one TIMESERT in this last hole. Then we are going to thread 4 cylinder studs in this hole, and then I've got a stock cylinder over here, and we're going to set that cylinder on top of there to confirm that those studs are straight and everything looks good. And what they should be, the 4 studs, when I put them in this hole and I drop that cylinder down in here, those 4 studs should pop up right in the center of the 4 holes that are in top of the cylinder. And if I've done that, we are golden and good to go. All right. Now, I want to show you guys a little something. Now, one of the things that complicates it, if there is a stud that has already stripped and pulled all the threads, that is the situation for you machinists that are watching, that I would use a dial test indicator to the 1/10 of a thou and zero in on one of these holes. That's how I would do that if the threads were completely stripped. The other thing I'm going to look at is if they're not completely pulled out, do I have 3 or 4 threads that I can thread into that are not deformed? Okay, so understand, I'm going to show you a quick way to do it, but those things, I've got one hole that's badly stripped out here that will have to be indicated in. The process will be the same. The only difference is how I center the spindle to the hole. And I'm going to show you a quick and easy way that I do that. First off, I precision machined this little stud right here with the thread size that is the same as a cylinder stud. Pretty simple, right? So I'm going to start by threading this into the existing known good hole. Then I'm going to take this lock nut and lock it down because I want it to be strong, centered, tight, and secure. I want to know that's going nowhere. Again, I have already checked the case on this axis, and I am to within a 1/2 thousandths of an inch in the X and Y axis. Okay? The next thing is we're going to bring this stud over to the middle of our chuck. Now, this is a Jacob's chuck, and for my machinist friends out there, a 100% more precise way to do this would be, without a doubt, with a collet. However, this Jacob's chuck is very straight. We have to remember we can be off a little bit on this, and it's not that big of a deal. So, I'm using a chuck, and it'll work just fine. You guys will see. So, since I know this is secure, I have this in a fixture that is good on my X and Y. I can actually loosen my fixture up a little bit on the table here to give me a little back and forth play. I don't need much because with my stud centered into the chuck, that's going to give me enough room to kind of move it back and forth. Alright, so I'm going to drop my chuck down on there and kind of tighten it up by hand a little bit. I want to see if I've got, what kind of play I've got in that chuck. I want to make sure that I don't have anything in a bind. And if I tighten up on that chuck and it's in its position and I loosen it, I should be able to raise my chuck, drop it back on there. Okay, I have a little bit of resistance. Let me move it a little bit. It's pulling back on it. Let's move back a little. Okay, there we go. Let's hand tighten my chuck a little. And all I'm doing is making sure that nothing's in a bind and I have free play. once I have that, and I know my fixture's flat on the table, and I feel confident about that, I'm going to tighten up my chuck onto that stud. I'm going to move it around, make sure I have free play. There's no question, my chuck is centered to that hole, or as close to center as it needs to be. I'm going to tighten my fixture down. Now I can loosen my chuck slightly because I still want to feel it. I just want to confirm that nothing is in a bind. And that feels fantastic. Perfect. Let's back our stud back out. Now let's start with drilling the hole. Now, I will go ahead and tell you, on TIMESERT kits, if you were to buy a TIMESERT kit, you're going to get these little small, short ones with the kit. I've seen a lot of people use these things. That's not what we want to use. I order these separately. You can see quite a bit different. They're a little over 1 inch long. That is, with the exception of only 2 threads, the same depth of the threads on the stud. The reason it needs to be slightly shorter is because of the expander tool that you use. It has to bottom out. None of these holes are pass-through holes, okay? Or blind holes. So we can't pass the tool all the way through. So we got to have a little bit at the bottom, but we have to remember it's much larger and also much stronger. All right, now that I have this perfectly centered, I'm going to zero my DRO. I've reached up there, done that. I'm also going to lock my table down. It's not moved. To within 1/10 of a thou, I am dead nuts on 0. So we're going to start with the drill bit. Alright, that hum you hear is obviously my 3-phase generator. Sorry about that, but it is what it is. Everything's secure. We're going to run it at about a 500 RPM here. One of the things you'll notice, I do not have a depth gauge on this drill bit, nor did I mark the drill bit. I've done a bunch of these, guys, so I know what it feels like when you get to the bottom of the hole. If this is your first time ever doing this, I would highly recommend that you measure the depth of the hole and mark your drill bit or use a depth gauge on your drill bit, a depth stop. That's a critical thing because you don't want to punch through. But I've done enough of these. I know when I'm at the bottom of the hole and I'm hitting the bottom. I can feel it, and that's when I know where to stop. All right, the next thing, we're going to run our tap. Now, you're going to see me do something with this tap. If you're new to using a mill, I don't recommend you do this on something that costs a bunch of money to replace. What I'm going to do is called power tapping. All right, you'll notice I drill the hole, then I put the tap in. I know this hasn't moved. I know my tap is perfectly centered in the hole. It's a great way to drill and tap. Power tapping can be quite destructive. The idea is I'm going to put my mill in its slowest setting, somewhere around 60 RPM, and I'm going to run it in back gear. I'm going to start the threading process with the tap, and I'm going to hand feed it into the case, and when I get just a little more than halfway through the hole, I'm going to stop the mill and back it out and then finish tapping it by hand. The reason I do that is I know that this tap is absolutely perfectly perpendicular to the case and in line with the hole. So that's how we're going to do it. We're going to go into our back gear, and again, if you're not familiar with this, I don't recommend power tapping until you've practiced. Copious amounts of thread lubricant. Okay, we're going to stop right there. Now, we're going to back our chuck off, and we're going to run the tap in by hand at this point. Now, good practice with the tap. Go about a half a turn, back it off to break the chip, to free it up. The only reason I'm using an open-end wrench at this point is because I don't have quite enough room to get my T-handle in there. After a couple more revolutions, I will have enough room, and I'll use a T-handle instead. Oily little sucker. Half a turn, break the chip, half a turn, break the chip. Work your way all the way to the bottom until it stops. As a side note, the only reason I'm doing it like this, guys, is because the Z-axis on this mill is as far down as it'll go, so there's not quite enough room. So that's the only reason. I know somebody in the comments is going to go, hey man, why don't you drop your Z-axis on the mill? Well, that's why. Okay, now the next step, one of the things, we got two things we got to look at. On a TIMESERT, you see that it countersinks a little bit right there. The other thing we've got to consider is on a stock stud, they have that shoulder, which I like to use. So that said, we've got to be mindful of that and put a proper depth in so that we bury the countersink of the TIMESERT as it should be. Also in your typical TIMESERT kit is this pilot tool with a countersink made into it. So now we move to that. We're going to go back to our high gear on the mill, run this at about 600 RPM. And that should be deep enough. Now, another thing we want to do, we're done with the machining process, so I can bring this over. That gives us enough room to drop a cylinder on there. All right. Now, with that moved, I want to put in some brake cleaner. A little bit of solvent in here because of the lubricants that I use to drill the hole. We want to get those out of there because we are going to use a copious amount of Loctite. Even though the folks that at TIMESERT will tell you you don't really have to use Loctite to retain their thread insert, this is one of those situations that we're just going to do it. All right, now we're going to take a peek into the hole. Make sure there's nothing down in there, and it looks great. Now, this is the anvil that comes with the ThreadSert kit, TIMESERT kit, I should say. And here's a little bit of advice. Get a good assembly lube. Put a little bit onto this taper tool. All right? Work it around there. Make sure the threads on your taper tool here are spotlessly clean and well oiled. All right? The next thing is take your thread insert. Make sure you do not get assembly lube on the outside of these threads. And what should happen is your insert should thread relatively easily onto this anvil without any tools. Okay, once you get it to that point, then put your Loctite on it. And this is way more Loctite than you guys have ever seen me use. I don't care, because we're going to wipe this off in a second anyway, right? Let's thread it into the hole. And it should thread by hand almost all the way down. You can see all the red Loctite that's piled up here. I'm fine with that, but I do not want it to get between the insert and the tool. So I'm going to wipe off that excess. All right, now let's run it in there. If I have more excess, let's go ahead and wipe that off as well. Then we'll take this, and you should notice that insert will feel like it's bottoming out just below the surface. It's going to squeeze out a little more of that Loctite. We're going to wipe that off. Now we're going to go home with it. All right? And this tool is going to be relatively tough to turn because we are expanding that ThreadSert. There will be a point, like right there, it gets a little easier to turn. But we continue to turn it until it stops and we've reached the bottom of the hole. Now we can safely back it out. We're going to wipe off the excess. Make sure we don't have any crazy pieces of metal sticking up. Now, another thing I'm also going to do is take a very fine file, and I want to just go over the top lightly to make sure I don't have any burrs. And again, a lot of this stuff, guys, is feel, okay? I'm not filing this. It's perfectly flat. I'm just feeling for any burrs or raised areas. I'm perfect there. All right, perfect. Now, the next thing I want to do is make sure that that ThreadSert is completely seated. So I'm going to thread a stud in there by hand. Look at how nice and easy that goes in there. And notice that sucker is not moving. This is what we're after. Now, it's going to stop when I get close to the bottom. right there, and I'm going to have about 2 turns, give or take, that I need to thread this stud down to finish expanding that insert. And I want to make sure it's seated all the way. You know, most studs are going to torque, or stock studs anyway, to, well, I torque them to 17 foot-pounds. You make your choice. I go 17. But I'm going to overdo it a bit. And I'm seated all the way. Let's back this back out. And notice it's not super easy for me to turn this by hand. It's a good tight fit. That's exactly what we want and what we're after. If we put studs into a stock aluminum case, those studs bounce all over the place. For example, let's just thread this one in by hand. About the same distance. And look at that. See, and this is not one of the stripped holes. This is stock. So let's back this one back out. And then just look at this one. It's not moving. It's a much better, tighter, much more precise fit. And then after I drop the cylinder on here, I'm going to show you guys a close-up, so hang in there with me. And since we're done with the mill, I'm going to turn off my 3-phase converter. Alright, that's a beautiful thing. Alright, that being said, I'll give you a close look now. Alright, you can see the inserts there. Alright, now, let's see if we did our job proper. Again, how tight that fit is. There's no movement or no shake, which is absolutely ideal. 3 that I did before, no shake. And that's far enough. Let me grab a cylinder. And this is a stock takeoff cylinder. And if we did everything proper, that's what we should have. And if I look at where the studs are, we are dead on center. Fantastic. Sorry guys, my camera went on the fritz. So we're good there. And then our studs, tight fit, and back out we go. Now the other thing I want to do, now that I've torqued all of these down, I want these to sit overnight. Because I want that Loctite to cure, and from that point on, it's as good as you can simply do for these engine cases. And there you have it. For all of you that asked, what the heck is a TIMESERT? Why can't I just use a Heli Coil? How can I save my cases? And for all those questions I get, I keep having head gasket leaks. Why does that happen, and how can I stop them? This is a good way to do it. And you know, for you guys, I turn off fans. Isn't that crazy? All right, guys. Again, thanks a million for watching. I hope this helps you guys. And if you don't mind, thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and then hit the new channel, Baxter's Day Off. And that's going to be the place I dump the cool stuff that I do on the 1 day a week I take off. On top of that, the last 2 videos I posted shared a little bit more about my life and what's been going on. And I want to take a minute to deeply thank all of you. I also want to thank all the members for sticking with me. I want to thank all the wonderful customers that I have, guys that own this engine case and others, for sticking with me, for being patient, for being kind, understanding I'm just doing the best that I can do. All of your comments filled my heart and made me realize, as I mentioned, I thought I may be in that last video, maybe I mean a little more than just that guy that throws out free YouTube videos. And that filled my heart. Thank all of you so much for your kindness. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your support. Hit the new channel. And as always, you know what's coming. Take care of yourselves and each other. Have a good one. See ya.